Good evening, and welcome to the January 27th, 2021 work session of the Penfield Town Board. I'll officially call this meeting to order, and allow me to read the official notice. Due to COVID-19 virus and the closing of town operations consistent with the governor's executive orders, the January 27th, 2021 Town Board work session meeting will be held remotely via Zoom. This meeting will also be video recorded and broadcast live via the town's website at penfield.org, on the town's government access cable channel 1303, and on streaming media device Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire. You may search the Penfield TV in your device's app store. This is a free app. The meeting will later be transcribed. Any questions this evening regarding video coverage, please contact Penfield TV 340-8661. And for the record, I will indicate that Councilman Moore, Ockenden, and Cole are in via Zoom here in the auditorium. Councilwoman Dra and myself. We also have our Deputy Town Clerk, Sue Scheit. And from our staff standpoint, we have our Director of Planning and Town Engineer, Mark Valentine. We have Mr. Tate, Eric Tate, who is our Director of Public Works, and Mr. Costello, who is our Director of Development Services. With that, Board, we do have the January 13th, 2021 minutes before us, and I would ask for a roll call, or excuse me, a motion of approval for those minutes.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilwoman Cole, seconded by Councilman Moore, and I'll ask any questions on those minutes. Okay, seeing no questions or comments, I would ask for a roll call vote of approval.
Dra.
Aye.
Cole.
Aye.
LaFountain.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay, before we get into the meat of our agenda this evening, I'll just let the record show that prior to the start of the work session, the board met at 6 o'clock from 6 to 7 to review our goals and priorities. This evening, we had the opportunity to meet with DPW, Mr. Tate, Engineering, Planning, Mr. Valentine, Development Services, Mr. Costello, and the communication side, Phyllis Ely. And those materials are available for review. With that, all the monthly reports have been in for this cycle. The next monthly reports are due in by the 10th of February. This evening, we do not have any public hearings. We do have one guest, and Lindsay Cray, for a discussion of use of town property for nature-based programs. And I'll ask Mr. Costello to give us a little bit more information on that while we bring Lindsay Carey in.
Thank you. Lindsay Cray, who actually I believe has worked with the Recreation Department in the past, contacted me a couple of weeks ago asking if she could talk to the town board about the possibility of conducting various types of programs, nature-based programs within town properties throughout the community. I indicated that this would be a good evening to do that, so I'm going to let Lindsay give you a breakdown as to what she's proposing. I know Mark Valentine's put up a letter of intent that she gave me a couple days ago, and I know that Mark also has photographs of her programs, which we can also show as she's speaking. So with that, Lindsay, go ahead.
Lindsay, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. I appreciate the board being willing to squeeze us in. I just want to make a quick note that my business partner, Meredith Rutherford, is also online with us here. So she's available to help answer any questions that I might not be able to. I serve as the CEO of Tribe Ecotherapy, and Meredith is our Chief Strategy Officer. The two of us ran an organization, I think Jim is referring to an organization that we ran, a nonprofit based in experiential education called the Earthworks Institute. And we had a great relationship with the town of Penfield. Very amicable, very eager to partner in getting kids programs, especially outdoor nature-based programs, up and running. So we worked a lot with Penfield Recreation Department, and like I said, it was a wonderful partnership. In 2018, we stepped away from doing just children's outdoor education programs because we saw that there was a much larger effect that outdoor exposure was having on our clients, not just the children of the families, but also, with adults, college students, individuals, that there was a huge wellness component that was just kind of happening organically. And we wanted to dive deeper into that. So here we are in 2021, and we have had Tribe Ecotherapy up and running for, well, the year of 2020, although there wasn't much happening with anybody in 2020. So to be fair, this is going to be our first year of actually running programs and services. And I'd like to make a quick distinction here for everybody that is watching, that while Earthworks did wonderful programs, Earthworks was very much based in children's education. And Tribe Ecotherapy both has clinical and non-clinical programs, but both of those types of programs are focused in wellness. And some of them are clinical therapy programs, and some of them are children's social emotional growth programs. What we're finding is that with COVID, there are a lot of people that are just struggling with lack of access to mental health resources, and that's trickling down to all of us. We're all kind of figuring out how to navigate with limited job access, limited financial access, how to reorganize our entire family structure with kids only being in school sometimes and not all the time, and especially for children who don't have that social emotional structure that they are accustomed to every day with interacting with other kids. That's also something that we wanted to bring to the community. So the information that you see in front of you is kind of a result of a conversation that I was having with Jim when I explained to him that we are offering two different services. Actually 3 different services, but I can dive into that a little bit later. But we are offering clinical and non-clinical services, both of which are going to necessitate outdoor access. And so when we say necessitate, there's just a couple of pieces to structure there, because not everybody understands when we say we need outdoor access, what that looks like. So as a person who is very experienced in coordinating programs, I have almost 18 years of program coordination experience. I have in my mind always what a piece of forest should look like when you're trying to run a successful outdoor program. And I know just in my experience working with Penfield that there are several. But this explains, we're looking at needing a piece of land somewhere in the range of 5 to 15 acres, or a small private acreage, maybe that backs up to non-private land. And obviously we need some level of privacy when we're working with adults in the more clinical programs, because if we're processing certain issues with people, we really don't want Jane Doe walking her Labrador as Bob the veteran is explaining some really intense circumstance that he found himself in when he was in combat. So we want to be able to offer some sense of privacy there. It's not so much so like that with the children's programs. There isn't a necessity for privacy, as really we're just working with kids outside and doing activities that build social emotional growth there. So the forest area we're looking at, imagine a type of forest that you'd like to walk through with your partner on a Sunday afternoon, right? You don't want to be bushwhacking through a bunch of honeysuckle or buckthorn or rose. You want to have space to walk. You don't want it to be mucky or filled with mosquitoes or poison ivy. You don't want to be sinking into a bunch of cattails and pond area and swampy area. So a forest that kind of emanates accessibility. And then obviously we were looking at Penfield because the accessibility issue is a big deal. If we're trying to run a program in an area that's 45 minutes away, we're asking people to tack on an hour and a half drive on the front end and on the back end of programs. So we'd like to not have to do that. So Penfield is a very accessible area to, you know, all of the surrounding spaces and neighborhoods. We'd like to, because it's very important to our programs, and anybody in City Rec will understand when I say this, we'd very much like to have the availability and the permission to make a fire in a contained fire pit. So we could bring a metal one with us, but if that was not necessary, we would have one space that we would move in and out of all of the time, that would have a stationary fire pit. And it would be nice to have an area where we could park some cars on arrival, right? So the would be nices, but not absolutely necessary. I've run programs without indoor space as a bad weather option during program time, so we aren't forced to cancel if there's a storm, and bathrooms for, well, obvious reasons. So
Can I just interject one thing?
Of course.
Also, important to note that there's no permanent infrastructure associated with our programming.
Correct.
The fire pit is the most impact on the land, apart from bodies, but we don't have any other kind of permanent infrastructure or setup. Everything we would bring in that day and bring back out.
Correct. I'm also just going to note, for curiosity's sake, that I am both a New York State licensed guide, and I'm trained and well-versed in leave no trace ethics and practices. I've also been an outdoor instructor for quite some time, so I have other certifications, like I'm a wilderness first responder, which allows me to practice some critical medical techniques that are almost equivalent to EMT. So my background when it comes to outdoor guiding and designing programs and thinking about space and impact of space, that's my profession.
And also, just of interest or note, I am a Penfield resident. I live in the Peachtree neighborhood.
And she
Right.
has 2 kids that attend Penfield schools.
Very good, thank you. So, can you tell us a little bit about the 2 areas that you selected? So the board has the materials that you presented to Jim Costello, and Jim got that out to the board so that we do have that. But could you highlight for us the 2 areas that you are looking at, and why you picked those areas, and what benefit that is to the overall program?
Sure. I think that the 2 areas that we chose, the primary reason why we chose them is because, the first area is off of Penfield Road, and it's the chunk of land that sits behind Gentle's Farm Market. I happen to know about that chunk of land because my father lived in the Allens Creek Village right across the street for years. So I was back and forth there all the time, and I also spent a lot of time dog walking, my dog back through Ellison Park. And so if you go to a certain area of Ellison Park, you can see where that land, now the Tate property, would back up to
Now the
Penfield.
now the RIT property.
Right, the Tate,
Right.
Tate RIT property. So I just happen to be really familiar with that area, and that was something that I'm, like I said, my profession is outdoor programs, so I always have chunks of land in my mind that kind of fit the exact need of what we're looking for. So there's that for that specific area. I think it would be great because depending on whether we can strike up a partnership with Clover Nursery, they might be willing to allow us to park a couple of vehicles there. I'm not sure if there's other access to that area or if there's other areas to park, but I'm sure that's something that Jim and I can discuss. I know that it's a nice chunk of forest. It's big enough for what we need. We don't need too much space, but it's also semi-private. I am aware that there's a gun club nearby. So I've heard it before. I understand that's something that happens. Not so frequently that I think it would be a huge disturbance. The other chunk of land is off of Empire Boulevard, and that property I came about because Meredith and I also have established a really long-term relationship with the Genesee Land Trust. So our relationship in looking for land dates back with them to 2013. And anytime we are on the lookout for land or they have suggestions for us, we get together, have a conversation, they'll show us a map of areas that might work. And it happened that there was a piece of land for sale, a piece of property for sale with a house on it, almost right next to the piece of property that the town owns. So while we were looking for a map, they pointed out that, oh, and by the way, this is town-owned land through Penfield, so depending on if you want to, it might be worth it. And again, the two things that I could see might be a problem, but I think visitation, just to take a quick look and walk around would help, would be potentially parking, because I don't know if there's any way to park there, to have 4 or 5 vehicles parked there at a time. And then I grew up in that area, so I know that the bay gets really steep really quickly, and I don't know how steep of a drop off that area is, but I know that it kind of connects with the same chunk of land that the Bayview YMCA owns, and I'm really familiar with that area back there. I've walked through Lincoln Park, so if it's anything like that, it might be good for us. But I would really only know by having the opportunity to go and walk it.
Lindsay, for the board's information, the land that she's referring to is the property, I think it was about 7 to 10 acres that the town took as part of the Water's Edge subdivision that's immediately adjacent to the Monroe County parkland to the north.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Okay, Lindsay, Meredith, anything else that you'd like to share with the board in addition to what we received from Mr. Costello and also your brochure that you provided us as well?
Mayor, I'm not sure if you would like to add anything. I'll just say 2 other points. The first point is, if those 2 pieces of land for whatever reason don't suffice, there are some other potential ideas, provided that the town is interested in working with us, that I had for properties. But again, that's only if the town is interested in discussing it further. And if Jim has the time to meet me out to go for a couple of walks, but we're not set on those exact pieces of land. Penfield happens to have a number of spaces that might be suitable. So if you're willing to have further discussion on that, we're very much open to being flexible.
Okay.
The last piece was, Jim and I also discussed the possibility that tribe programming is not only accessible, we don't want it only to be accessible for the clientele that we're able to find, but that if the town finds it suitable, we're more than happy to think about how we can make unique Penfield specific programs for either children or adults. Again, our clientele right now would be small homeschool groups that have kind of followed us through the years, and the Veterans Outreach Center, because both Meredith and I are children of veterans, and it's an area of interest for us given our background and who our parents were. But everybody is dealing with stress right now, and because that's what Tribe does, we'd like to open the venue for whatever need there is. So happy to partner with Penfield if the need arises.
Okay.
And I would just add that I see that the promotional sheet that you have is focused on veterans. That's one of our service lines. But if anybody's interested in learning more about our youth nature immersion programs or our team and organizational wellness programs, we have companion documents to this that provide a little bit more information. I also just want to point out too that our therapeutic programs are in partnership with the VOC, as Lindsay said, and that all of our clientele are vetted through the therapists ourselves and the therapists we work with. So I know there has been some concern on some other land that we've been exploring that geez, therapeutic programs, is that going to be tough? What about the clientele? But these are all folks that are on the recovery path already and have shown some interest in continuing and expanding their healing and recovery. So, and also the last thing I want to say is that the overall land use is pretty minimal during the springtime. We are interested in potentially running summer programs, which would be more full days as the kids are out of school. But right now, both our therapeutic and our nature immersion programs are only 3 hours a week for a series of weeks for 4, 6, and then 12 weeks. So pretty low impact.
Got it. And what might be the maximum number of people at any one given time that you might have?
Great question. So because our aim is to keep this very COVID friendly, if you will, our groups are no bigger than 10 to 12 at a time. So when we are working with children outside, those groups stay small, and when we are working with adults, those groups also stay small. So let's say if we had a group of 10, there would be 2 other tribe instructors. That makes a total of 12. If we had a group of 12, again, 2 other tribe instructors. That makes a group of 14. So we keep it very small, and like Meredith said, it's not a multi-day thing. Very often, maybe for a summer program, but most of the time, it's one group at a time.
Is it safe to say that everybody comes individually to the location, or is there a bus, carpooling, other means of transportation so that you have minimal vehicles involved?
So that's what we're working with. So for example, we are in the process of establishing a partnership for a program with the Veterans Outreach Center that will hopefully eventually be funded. And the Veterans Outreach Center has access to vehicles. So the individuals that would sign up, let's say through them, they volunteer themselves to be there. They're interested in the program, and therefore it's their responsibility to show up at the VOC location, pile into a van, and then arrive at the site. So there might be 2 additional cars for 2 additional instructors, tribes, staff. When it comes to the children's programs, oftentimes my experiences with homeschoolers is that they like to carpool. And so if you have 12 kids out there, you're not going to have 12 vehicles. You might have 4 or 5 vehicles. And we can, like I said, we have very good relationships with those families because they've been with us for such a long time. So it's an easy enough reminder for them, hey, by the way, if you can carpool, parking is limited.
And for those programs, unless we get a full group of smaller children, most of the parents will come and go, drop off, and then come back. And I want to add that the nature immersion, part of that is teaching about land stewardship and how to preserve land and how to care for it. So, that would all be part of our curriculum as well.
Got it. Okay. Board questions, either for Lindsay or Meredith on this item?
I just had a question. You mentioned that you had done some work through our rec department or with our rec department in the past. Can you just highlight that a little bit and tell me a little bit about what those programs were and how it worked?
Absolutely. So we worked a lot. Basically, my direct contact there was Sabrina Kessler. I'm pretty sure Kessler's still her last name.
Sabrina Renner?
Renner, thank you.
Yep,
I haven't actually connected with her in the last 3 years due to the hiatus. But at any rate, so her and I talked probably 2-3 days a week, making sure that all the programs and everything were in order. But every season, what would happen would be I would get in touch with her. We'd talk about how many programs we wanted to run, what would be a reasonable rate to charge. And again, this was in partnership with one another, so I'm not telling her. We're kind of brainstorming how to work it together. We will talk about, okay, so this is how many kids of this age showed up in the winter, and typically winter is more minimal than during the warmer months, so we can expect this many kids for, the summer or whatever else. Boys, how many boys versus girls, what the age groups were, that type of thing. And then, again, we would talk about costs together. What do we think is reasonable to charge for the program? What percentage does Tribe get? What percentage does Penfield Rec keep? And then we would always renew a memorandum of understanding or some sort of an agreement or a contract. So that was pretty normal for us. And Sabrina was always great at helping us brainstorm property use. So depending on what was available for the season, for example, we would use Veterans Memorial Park a lot. The other park is Harris Wayland Park that we had access to. And depending on what our need was, how big the group was, we would decide, okay, so which location is going to work best depending on how things are predicted to happen. The kids would sign up through the Penfield Rec website, and then we would get an email from Penfield Rec telling us, okay, this is how many kids you have signed up, here's the roster. The roster would have the contact information. We would reach out to the parents, have them sign, at the time, an Earthworks liability waiver, like we always do, and provide us with medical information in case of an emergency. And then, programs would roll. So we would have staff show up at the location, the kids and families would show up at the location, and we would take roll call, and go out and let the kids go do their thing, And then at the end of the program time, everybody shows back up to the same place. Parents come and do the pickup and take off for the afternoon. And of course, there's always the parents that like to stick around and talk and, ask how the day was, or, this is something that I think, so, my child was talking about that maybe we could try. Pretty typical recreation program.
And I want to add, pardon me, that we also are individually insured as well as,
Right.
so we do have the liability forms, we do have land use contracts, and we are insured.
Okay, and so the programs then, it sounds like we're primarily kid focused. Is it changed a little bit then? Now it's both, it's kid and adult, veteran, that type of thing? Changed a little bit?
Right, so again, Earthworks was very much an expeditionary learning organization. It still is, actually. We handed Earthworks over to the Center for Youth Services. So now it's a program within the Center for Youth. They continue to do after-school programs. I believe they still have a small contract with Penfield, so they still do kids programs after school with Penfield. But Earthworks was not really based in personal development. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to teach outdoor and wilderness skills. So with Tribe, it's very different. Like I said, there's two different buckets you can put our programs in. One is clinical, where we have clinically licensed therapists, a social worker, a mental health counselor, to work with adults. And then we have the non-clinical programs, which are equally as important and impactful, but we don't have a therapist out there, and those are the programs to work with kids. So we talk about communication, patience, advocating for yourself, what to do if you're, being bullied. We do the work outside, but it's very much social emotional growth. It has nothing to do with curriculum. It has nothing to do with, like how to survive in the wilderness, although being out there is a part of that. So they're two very differently oriented buckets of services. And like Meredith mentioned, there's also kind of like what I would call a subservice that we're building right now, and that is the team and organizational wellness, where we would take a group, for example, maybe a group that does Quad A or Career Start, people whose staff are really needing to have some team cohesion or de-stress because of everything that's happening with COVID. And it's our job to bring them outdoors and kind of give them a half day or a full day experience and how to work cohesively as a team. And we have like a whole bag of tricks, if you will, that I've been running for years through Cornell Cooperative Extension and whatnot, to provide those services. So clinical and non-clinical.
Okay, and your website shows, that you have a fairly large number of staff members that you work with. How many, let's say, I'll just say adults would be on site during a kid program? Do you have a certain ratio that you follow, or
Yes.
how do you structure that?
Great questions. You guys are asking awesome questions tonight. So we run programs where it's a 2 to 10 ratio. So when it comes to kids, I like to have, typically what they advise in an outdoor setting is 1 to 7 ratio. I, over my years of experience, have found that 1 to 7 is not enough. So 2 to every 5 kids, or rather 2 to every 10 kids is what we like to have. So if we're out there with a group of instructors, there will be one individual maybe working with a group of 7 kids, and then another individual working with maybe a group of 10 kids, and then maybe another, not a direct instructor, but a tribe staff person out there jumping between 2 groups, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Board, other questions for Lindsay or Meredith? Okay, let's talk about next steps. So certainly there was a lot of information that you did submit to us, and we discussed this evening. I think the board will probably want to circle back with Sabrina and chat with her about the programs that we've had in the past. And then we'll gather, if we have any additional questions, we'll reach back out to you. We'll do that via Mr. Costello. We're always looking for Mr. Costello to improve his overall wellness. And so if there is an opportunity to meet at one or both of those sites between now and the next time the board meets, I'm certainly sure that he's willing to do that. And then.
Thank you.
And what we would look to do is in 2 weeks is our next work session, that we'd bring that back for any further conversation, and then final decision about either next steps and what have you. So in the meantime, as I said, if we have any additional questions, we'll funnel those through Jim if the board needs any additional information.
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate you listening and giving us all your time. And the great questions tonight. Thank you for asking such informed questions.
Great. Thank you for your time as well. Please be well and be safe.
You as well. Take
All
care.
right, we'll stay connected. Thank you. Okay, board, we will now move on to action items. Our first action item this evening is a request for 2 driveway curb cuts at 123 Water Song Trail, and I'll recognize Mr. Tate on this matter.
Thank you. Good evening. So I was contacted, actually originally Mr. Costello was contacted by John Antetomaso. He's the developer over in the Water Song subdivision, requesting and kind of kicking around the idea of the possibility to have 2 curb cuts for the corner lot. It's going to be lot 160 within the neighborhood. It's part of the phase 4B. Within that, it's the northeast corner of Mayor's Garden and Water Song Trail. The client that's looking to have a house built on that lot has requested was the one to inquire about the idea of having kind of a loop driveway and 2 curb cuts. As you can see on the kind of sketch, they did have a they did have the kind of plan put together showing that it'd be, each curb cut would be 18 foot wide. It would be set back a little bit from the intersection so that it's not kind of impeding on traffic right there. Biggest thing they're looking to see if the town board would be willing to entertain the idea. Historically, there are other lots within town that have been granted 2 curb cuts, particularly corner lots. But certainly wanted to bring that before the board for any thoughts and questions.
Okay. Board, questions for Mr. Tate on this proposal?
Eric, excuse me, Eric, it's Andy Moore. Just, you know, I kind of always ask this question with department heads. Do you have a recommendation based on your experience with, you know, public works and curb cuts and driveways and plowing and sidewalks? Do you have a recommendation for us?
So personally, I would always love to kind of minimize the number of curb cuts. However, because of the kind of the shape of the lot and the orientation of the house, I understand why it would be, you know, beneficial here. You know, especially being on the corner, you know, they, depending on what way they're coming from, they could pull in and pull back out. You know, and certainly could be a, you know, kind of a safety improvement, more or less. So overall, I would be supportive of it.
Okay.
So, Mark, where you have the arrow, okay, so the board, you see the larger picture where Mark is just describing, that's the lot, that's an overhead look of the lot, and how the driveway would come out, one road that is in now. And is the other one a dedicated road or soon to be a dedicated road, Mr.?
The stub portion is there. This falls under section 3B. The Inti Tomaso Group has talked about coming back in for that. That would connect to Mayor's Farm to the south. So the stub's there. They've kind of roughed out the road. This is a little bit of an older photo. They've kind of got the elements are roughed in, but the road itself is not, you know, contiguous as far as, you know, pavement. But the stub is there at the end of, this was section 5. This was 4B here, so it's kind of at the corner of that piece. And then you can see this will continue tie back into the Watersong Trail and then also to the south to, what's Mayor's Gardens to the south?
Sea-Watch.
Sea-Watch, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Excuse me, Mr. Supervisor, a footnote to this property. If you, Mark, if you could go back to the survey map.
Yep.
In talking to Andy Savagas, who is the one who assigns property addresses for new subdivisions, they have assigned 123 Watersong at this point in time, but there's an indication that because Mayor Gardens is the prolonged street along the frontage of the property, there may be a change in the address, which happens on a regular basis, to 36 Mayor's Garden. It's going to be an alternate if our emergency people are supportive of doing that. It's for their benefit, actually. Emergency responders. So corner lots generally do get 2 property addresses, and then one's dropped when we finally decide which way the house is going to be oriented and all those other issues that come into play with it.
Okay. Board, any additional questions or comments for Eric or for Mr. Valentine on the planning side of things?
No.
Eric, would the positioning of the home change any if that request was denied?
So I do not know that answer. Originally, they, I believe the first sketch that he gave me showed the house at that kind of slight angle without any curb cuts drawn on it. So I believe the intent is to have the house at that angle, kind of facing, you know, more or less splitting the difference between both streets. I guess if it were denied, they would just have to figure what side or what street they would want a single driveway to come out to.
Gotcha. Okay, and I'm guessing it's angled because it may give them a little more backyard space too by the looks of it. So,
And likely help with, you know, some of the setbacks as well.
yeah, okay, thanks.
Board, other questions or comments for staff? Okay. Then, Board, what's your interest of moving forward or not with this application?
I would move that we accept the 2 driveways. Sounds like it's a safety consideration, it's positive. Our DPW director says he likes the idea. And then we've done it before in other places, so it's not something new. I think it's the right thing to do, so I move that we grant that.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
I second that, Mr. Supervisor.
Okay. Further discussion? Just for the record, I will be voting against this. I typically vote against this unless there's some really unusual situations or circumstances. So that's more of a consistency standpoint with my end about minimizing the number of curb cuts onto the highway. So I want to just make sure that that's on the record before we go to a vote. All right.
Mr. Supervisor, may I just ask you a question?
Please.
Would it, if we're voting tonight, would you have a chance to take as a board, or would I have a chance to take a look at this, go over to the water song and take a look at it? How are we in as far as?
So there's currently a motion on the table to grant and second it. If the maker of the motion and the seconder is willing to take that off the table, and if you're willing to make a motion to table until 2 weeks from now, then and can get a second to do that, then we can go that route. So I would just ask the maker of the motion and the seconder, would you be willing to withdraw your motion at this time to allow 2 weeks?
Certainly, if Debbie feels that she needs to go see the property, I'm fine with withdrawing the motion for tonight and waiting for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore, are you willing to withdraw your second? Thank you.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. And then I'll recognize Councilwoman Draw for a tabling motion.
Yes. So, Mr. Supervisor, then I would like to, I move that we table this, this request for the 2 curb cuts at 123 Watersong Trail tonight till the next, till we get a chance to take a look at it, please.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Moved by Councilwoman Draw, seconded by Councilman Ockenden. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, then I'd ask for a roll call vote to table.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden,
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay. We'll move on to item B, and this is the annual pond treatment review. Mr. Valentine, I think this is at least the 3rd or 4th year that Mark has updated us on this, and I'll recognize him for further information and details.
Thank you. Yeah, this is something we've been doing annually. Small treatments where needed for the overall function of the pond. We routed this or vetted this through the watershed committee back in, I believe our last meeting was in November. Went through with them. We've used this ATIP group, gone back and got quotes every year from them, as well as others to make sure we're there with cost. But we've got certain ponds that have quite a bit of growth, whether water lilies, duckweed, other things in them that have been creating some blockages in our outfall structure to make sure that they function properly. We do get a lot of calls about algae. We don't treat for algae. There is no treatment for blue-green algae, so it's not an aesthetic purpose. We're not dyeing the ponds blue or some of the stuff that's done in the past. These are kind of spot treatments that we're doing just in areas that have been creating some blockage issues for us, impacting the functionality of the pond. So we've worked with this ATIP group, provided this to the board previously, and as well as the watershed committee, vetting it through that group to make sure that they're comfortable with it as well. These are at times applying a herbicide treatment. The company is certified, insured. We do have to send out postcards to the neighbors, letting them know that this treatment is going on. We work with Eric and his crew, especially with Glenbrook Pond. We can lower the pond, block the outfall structure so the treatment is there, and then it can dissipate before any chemical goes downstream. This does go through the DEC and is permitted as well, so this is not just at the town's whim that we're doing this. It is done by certified people that have certifications for this. Again, we have to get permits from the DEC, so that's why we're bringing it so early in the year. In the past, we've waited a little bit, and then with high lake levels and some other items, it pushes it later in their season, and, we've been into the fall before we've gotten our annual permit, so we've got to get an annual permit or approval from the DEC to do these treatments. So that's why we're bringing it forward to the board at this time of year to kind of talk about it. We can get our permits and then do the proper treatment. Typically is in the June timeframe, especially for the water lilies. You have to make sure that they're up, and then they actually put the treatment on the lilies to make sure they kind of kill those off.
Board, questions for Mark on this item? Okay. Seeing no questions or comments, as I indicated, this is the at least the third or fourth year that we have been working on this. We've vetted this out. We've worked with DEC and others on this to provide, as Mark has indicated, not from an aesthetic standpoint, but from a functionality standpoint. So if there are no further questions, would entertain a motion of approval to move forward with this application as we've done in the past.
Mr. Supervisor, I move that we accept these proposals and we move it forward for.
Okay. So motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Cole, moved by Councilwoman Dra. I'll ask one last opportunity, further discussion, questions for staff on this. Okay, seeing none, I'd ask for a roll call vote of approval.
Draw.
Aye.
Cole.
Aye.
LaFountain.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay, we'll move on to item C. This is private pond maintenance, and once again, I'll recognize Mr. Valentine.
Thank you. So tonight may be more of a discussion or the start of a conversation. As we go through our ponds, we have, I think, currently 199 ponds in town. Many of them are owned and maintained by the town. Many of them are also owned by private properties. The ones that are owned by the Wegmans of the world, the Home Depots, those are owned by an individual entity. They maintain them, they take care of them. Those really aren't the issue. We are sending letters out, or do send letters out every 3 years, such that we have to do inspections of our ponds every 3 years, make sure they're functioning, make sure they get the maintenance that are needed. We send them out to the residential properties as well. So the bigger ones aren't the issue concern that we have. Some of them are smaller ponds that are owned by individuals or more fall under residential. And we kind of have, and I can share some schematics with it. I just kind of, here's our inventory of private ponds that we have. I can provide this to the board as wanted needed, but just sharing the number we have, the breadth of them that we have. But we've got kind of a gambit of things. We've got private ponds that are ponds that handle the drainage for an entire subdivision that are owned by one private individual. We've got one right on, we were just talking about Watersong, the neighborhood to the south of it. I've got a schematic of that one, Mayor's Gardens aerial. So this is 5 Mile Line Sea Watch Trail. We've got an individual that owns the pond for the entire neighborhood. This is the way it was done at that time. We have some language in there that the functionality of the pond is our responsibility, but the overall maintenance of the pond, the banks and stuff, is that of the private homeowner. In the past, whether we've been consistent or not, we did some mowing. This year we stopped doing mowing. It's really the homeowner's issue. His attorney has sent us a letter saying we can't do that, and we can't ask him, one, to do a report, and two, we need to maintain the pond and take care of it, and that's the way he knows it. So some of these issues I'm bringing up to the board is, as we try to strive to get some consistency, you as board members are going to hear some outcry from residents is that we always done this way. Why are we stopping doing it this way? Why aren't we doing it this way? So on some private ponds, we have done maintenance in the past. Not sure why not. Other ponds, we haven't done maintenance in the past. Other ones I'll bring up, and we send our letters out, as I shared before. We've got Graceland Estates. This is in the northwest quadrant of town. Triple Diamond Way, Plank Road is to the south. we've got a private pond that is technically owned by up to 12 neighbors. We sent out our every 3-year letter to those 12 neighbors. I don't know which one officially owns all of the ponds. We sent all of them a letter saying, hey, you guys got to do an assessment report. This is a requirement of the EPA and the DEC. We sent out 12 letters. We got 0 letters back, as well as 0 report back. So part of our concern is who is responsible for the report, who's responsible for the maintenance of it. This one is in the backyards of these neighbors. They seem to do a good job of maintaining it. But as a requirement of the DEC and the EPA is every 3 years, all ponds are required to have an engineered assessment report. There's a cost to that. But thus far, of those 12 neighbors, I haven't figured out which one is the one that has to pay up and the rest of them don't. So we sent out those letters, but again, you may hear some feedback from residents on that. And these are just samples. I've got more, and we can get into, more of a discussion at some point in the future, but Jamonda Way, the board dealt with this a couple of years ago. It was a private drive that the town board moved over to being a dedicated road. But again, we've got 2 ponds on this, and I've got the second one, that again, the drainage for the neighborhood drains onto one property, but that handles the drainage for the neighborhood. So this one brings up an issue that at this property, 1, we've got no report, and 2, we've seen no maintenance on it. The pond is beginning to be quite overgrown, has a lot of trees, isn't starting to be functional. So we are going to have to figure out, 1, if it only affects that lot, maybe that's not a big deal, but as it starts to affect the neighborhood or affect the other neighbors around it, where and how does the town step in to enforce what is done, the maintenance? We've got one in the back, and then we've got, one in the front as well, and I'll bring that one up. So the front pond is up by 441. We sent off the letter, and the homeowner said, "Oh, why do I have to, do the engineer report? It's the drainage pond for the whole neighborhood." Well, unfortunately, it's on your lot. It falls under your property, and we've got others that, say, well, why doesn't the town come help? Why doesn't the town maintain it? Why don't you do the inspection? So not looking for an immediate answer, tonight from the board, but just kind of bringing up the conversation we need to start having is how do we handle these private ponds? I think we need to come to some consistency that either we're in and we help, or we're totally out. If we step out, some areas we've been doing some parts, some areas we haven't been doing parts. So kind of wanted to bring it to the board's attention. We'll need more further conversation, but you may be hearing from residents is, hey, the town used to help me, now they're not, or, this is unfair, whatever else. So again, wanted to bring it to the board's attention that this is going to become more of an issue. These reports are required every 3 years. We send out letters. Maintenance is always required with anything that you own in these ponds. And as they start to, impact the neighbor or the drainage within the neighborhood, you may hear some outcry from other neighbors in the neighborhood the drainage isn't working. So I don't have a perfect answer. I don't think the board has a perfect answer tonight. But just as we you may hear some outcry from residents around the town that things are changing, they're being asked for more stuff. But just as we move forward, we're going to have to come up with, and, we can come up with a plan and then, run it back through the board. But how do we handle these? And then if things change, you're aware of why some residents are crying foul that, things have changed from what they were in the past. If we say they're private, they're fully private, you need to provide your part of it.
So this is some sins of the past. Many of these ponds may not have even been installed when, well, at least Mr. Ockenden for sure being on the board, but many of us being on the board, this is kind of a culmination. And as we see new regulations, stormwater regulations coming out, the expectations to make sure that these are being addressed and taken care of and what have you. We'll definitely need to have some input and feedback from Mr. Horowitz. There is some legislation that talks about doing work on private property, and if it's truly on private property, the town's ability to go in and do work there are some rules and regulations about that. So I commend Mark for at least bringing it to our attention, because what will happen is that there may be a buy here, but at some point, DEC, as they come in and take a look at our list of ponds, and we have provided the input feedback for those that we own, and then they see a list that is another twice that long, where no information has been submitted. They're going to start asking questions, and they're going to probably start knocking on homeowners' doors. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to take a look at how do we address this going forward. I think we've got a good process in place now for ponds where we set up a special district and make sure that folks know that before they buy the lot, and that gets taken care of. That doesn't take care of what we've got today. And my guess is that one area that Mark showed where there were roughly 11 or 12 properties touching, if you went and said we'd like to set up a special district, I'd be surprised if you get any of them that would be willing to sign up for that special district. So some work ahead. I might suggest that we entertain a motion to table this evening, and then to continue to work and vet this out with Town Attorney Horowitz, Town Engineer, and other staff members as appropriate, and then come back to the board with some recommended path forward in different areas.
I'd move that we table this with all the things you just said.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, Mr. Supervisor.
Been moved by Councilwoman Cole, seconded by Councilwoman Draw. So we're going to show this as a held item. However, we need to make sure we don't forget about it either as we move forward. So seeing no further discussion on this matter, I'd ask for a roll call vote, please.
Draw.
Aye.
Cole.
Aye.
LaFountain.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to item D, and this is Allen's Creek soil sampling requirements. And once again, I'll recognize Mr. Valentine.
So as we continue to move along on our Allen's Creek remediation project for stabilization within that neighborhood, this board's aware we've been working on that for many, many years, have submitted the project and the plans to both the DEC and the Army Corps. As they're going through their review process, one of the items the DEC has asked for is soil samples of the areas that, as we're working to create that stabilization, we need to create like some splash pools as you come in, have some stone weirs, check dams as you go through some of these areas. So part of that will cause some soil disturbance. We're working with the DEC on what time of year, dry season, everything else. But as that material is being removed, they want to know what is in that soil and what's in that sediment. So they have asked for one, soil samples. We've got to do 6 samples that can be combined into 3. 1 in the water, 1 on the shore. Those can be merged together and then sampled as one sample, and they want 3 down the way. So in working with Barton LaJudas has been the consultant we've been working with on this project. They've put up what that would entail. 1, obviously the sampling of it, and then 2, the chemical analysis. So they want to know if we're taking this material out, does it have heavy metals in it? Does it have VOCs in it? Can it be used as backfill somewhere else? If we truck it off and the DPW needs it for somewhere, can we use it as fill? Or, if there's heavy metals or other, chemicals in it, does it have to be taken directly to the landfill? So either we could potentially put it on the contractor, at the job at the time that they do that. But I think that opens us up. If I'm a contractor and I don't know if this is toxic waste coming out of here, I'm going to bid really, really high. Or my recommendation is let's do the sampling now, know what we're working with, and then if it's simply just sediment and they can use it on the next job, obviously it's a benefit for them. Now it's a material they can use on another project. Or if they knew they got to provide trucking costs and take it to the landfill, and then you got to pay tipping fees at the landfill. So I don't expect there to be any chemical issues, but until we do the samples, we don't know. We did have an original contract, so this is an amendment to the contract we did probably 2 or 3 years ago. So we have an original bid with Barton LaJudas. This is now an extra. It's above that limit of what we can do as an extra, so that's why it's coming back to this board. This would be an add-on or an addition to that original contract that Barton LaJudas had.
And we'll let the record reflect, this is something that the state is requiring us to do. This is something kind of above and beyond what we had originally planned for as part of this. And I think Mark and his team are making a good recommendation that we do that prior to going out for bid for the bigger project. That way, we know what we have or don't have, and that can give us better bids as we move forward. So I'd ask board questions for Mark at this time.
May I ask one, Mr. Supervisor? Mark, question, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but the $8,300, we would bear that whole cost? There's nothing, no kind of rebate program with the
Yeah,
soil and-
unfortunately, no. And
you
as
know.
the supervisor shared, this is a requirement from the
Right,
DEC.
right.
We do have money, in the drainage fund
Right.
dedicated to it. We've carried monies over for the Ellens Creek project, so it can be covered, within the engineering budget. We're not asking for, any shift in funding, but it is an expansion to the original contract. So it's not a, additional thing that we need to reallocate money. We can handle it within the engineering department budget. We do have, money every year planned for projects, similar to these.
Right.
But just since it's an expansion to that contract, we do need to get the board's approval on that.
Okay. Other questions, board? Someone like to make a motion? This would be something that we would then look to have a resolution at our next legislative session. This would be an amendment to specifically address the sediment sampling and the analysis cost for this project.
I'll move that, Mr. Supervisor, if no one else, I'm too sure, that we agree to this estimated cost of $8,300 to the Allen Creek soil sediment sampling that Mr. Valentine has so nicely put out for us.
Okay. Been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilwoman Draw, seconded by Councilman Ockenden. Any further questions or comments?
Mr. Supervisor, real quick, would this fall under the category of yet another unfunded mandate?
I don't know if it's a mandate. I mean, it definitely is a request from the DEC as part of the project. It's being facilitated by us pursuing the project. So it's not we've got to sample every stream, but obviously it is at the DEC's request to get this sampled. So,
But isn't the overall project at the request of the state DEC?
no, actually that's something we're working with, just to the erosion we've had, in the area. So the erosion, the hill slide we had a number of years ago, the erosion loss of property that the residents are seeing. The town of Penfield is one that's initiated the project, but obviously we've got to go through both the state and the feds, the U.S. Army Corps, to get approvals to, continue with that project.
Okay.
So I think part of the answer is, Andy, that as we've been talking with the DEC about this, we've had a couple of items come up on this project that we've had to provide some additional information. So we've gone down a path of our normal work, engineering, and planning for. And then we've had a couple of other requests by DEC. And in this particular request, we do not and have not had it on other applications that we've had in the past. But we did have a request on this item.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so a motion's been made and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, I'd ask for a roll call vote to move forward with this.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden,
Aye.
5 ayes.
We'll move on to item E, and this is a request for a storage shed at 1794 Penfield Road, Chick Magnet. And speaking of chick magnets, I'll recognize Mr. Costello.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Nicely done. A few weeks ago, I got a call from Jeff Cristiano, who I believe is with us this evening, if I'm not mistaken. The problem was, when he first opened up, he brought in a Verdi storage trailer and put it in the area where you see the black circle on that map. He was immediately notified that, and he did that out of ignorance. He didn't realize he needed a permit to do that. Fire marshal stopped by and let him know that that was not a permitted activity. And he called me immediately and asked what kind of alternatives he could do to make sure that he had adequate storage for his facility at that location. I suggested a storage shed. We've had storage sheds on that site in the past. Actually, I think there was one actually in the location he's proposing right now. There is an existing storage shed just to the left of that, if you'll note. And just to the left of that, there are two refuse dumpsters. You may remember when Jeff came in for his approval back in December, that the board set conditions of approval regarding fencing, removal of fencing and replacement of fencing later this year. In addition, they also required that the dumpsters be enclosed as well, which he'll be working on as part of the fencing program. So he's asking for a shed, and I'll let him talk a little bit quickly about the size of the shed. I think there's also a photograph of what the shed looks like, if I'm not mistaken.
Gentlemen,
Good evening, everybody.
two more chick magnets.
Hardly.
You found it, Mark?
So what we're looking for is an 8x12 pre-constructed shed that we would use for our dry storage. Right now we have, we're woefully lacking in space here for us to put things like paper products and bulk containers and things like that. It would be almost in that exact same spot that's circled in the Penfield diagram there.
So as I take a look at the circle, there's a building in that circle now. Is that building going to go away, or is it going to stay?
That building doesn't exist.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was an aerial photo of Penfield House.
That's probably a picture of the previous shed.
So we're going to have to, we're not getting your mic coming through clear. We are your sons, but we got to make sure that we're getting that into the record.
Yeah, so the shed that's in the photo there, that's an aerial photo of the old Penfield House, and that's exactly where we would plan on putting the 8x12 shed.
Okay, and then basically that shed that shows there today really is not there, and then you're just replacing what was there once before.
Correct, yes.
Okay. And I think in the information that I saw, you were looking to, and as you indicated, paper products, napkins, plates. You also indicated rolls, bread, things like that as well. Is that what I understood? Okay. So board, and I'm going to ask maybe everything go through your son, only because we cannot hear you either too far from the mic, not mic'd up, whatever the case is. So I guess he's got your back tonight. So I'll ask the board any questions for the owner operators of Chick Magnet about what they're proposing at that location. And I'll ask Mr. Costello, from a setback standpoint, is there anything that, and again, I recognize this is within the Four Corners District, but I just, it appears to be right on pretty much the property line.
It is pretty close to the property line, Mr. LaFountain. Obviously, the shed that they're showing there was in the same situation that this one is in. And another comment is the existing shed that is there, do you have any idea what it's being utilized for?
That belongs to the landlord, and I've never seen the inside of it.
Lawn care.
Yeah, I think they use lawn care products. It's padlocked and we don't have access to it.
Okay.
Got it. Okay.
So yes, you're right. It's a substandard setback to the requirement of 20 feet. There is a fence there. It's been there quite a while. And we have not had complaints from the adjacent property owner regarding that location.
Okay. Board, additional questions or comments for the applicants?
Just one question. The picture of the shed that you plan to do, is it pretty much that cream with the brown trim? Or is that standard color? Or is that
Yeah, it's about, when we went there and looked at it in person, it was gray with a black trim.
Oh, okay.
It's gray on the screen here. It's a little harder on
Gotcha. Okay, I saw it.
on the projector. It looks cream, but it's gray and black
It's more
here on
gray.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Other questions, Board, for the chick magnets? Any one of the three? All right. I'll ask Mr. Costello, is there anything that has not been entered into the record that you believe should be that we haven't already discussed?
No, but if you're inclined to grant the request, I would ask you to allow me to go out and specifically identify the setback that the building will be located as related to the fence or the property line so that we have a clear record of what that setback will be
Okay.
in our
All
final
right.
product.
Good point. I'll ask the applicant's operators, any additional information that you would like to provide to the record that we haven't already discussed this evening?
I think we're all set.
And if it were a perfect world, when would you propose to locate that shed at that location?
Yeah, I would say either Sunday or Monday. Those are 2 days off, and we're looking to swap out the shed that the trailer that we have now. We're looking to get it out of. We're looking to get rid of it as soon as possible. And yeah, we would try to make this happen very quickly.
Okay. All right. Board, any additional questions or comments? Okay. Would entertain a motion to move forward with this if the board were so inclined.
I'll move it.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Moore, seconded by Councilman Ockenden. One last opportunity. Any additional questions or comments? And let the record show that this is a replacement of a shed that was previously there. It also takes the place of a trailer that was spotted there, and that will be removed as well. And one of the other items is that Mr. Costello will meet with the operators prior to the spotting of that so that the shed gets moved in one time, not multiple times. Okay, seeing no further discussion, I'd ask for a roll call vote, please.
Cole? I'm sorry, Droff?
Aye.
Cole?
Aye.
LaFountain?
Aye.
Moore?
Aye.
Ockenden?
Aye.
5 ayes.
All right, we'll move on to item F. This is Bulow. This is the request for conditional use for a barber shop at 1822, 1826 Penfield Road in the Four Corners. Mr. Costello.
Thank you, Mr. LaFountain. The town board did hold a public hearing for this application on the 20th. Some of the highlights of the application were that Mr. Bulow was going to install 5 chairs. He would lease 4 of the chairs to other barbers, and he would have a chair for himself, generally speaking, on the weekends, on Saturday, as he works during the week. He also provided a sign package, and I'd like to go to the sign package if we could, Mark. Provided a sign package of the property, of his portion of the property. As you know, that building was painted a couple of years ago by the landlady, and he would like to paint a portion of the building. It looks like grays and blacks. One of the things I would recommend that, and as you know, being the board, the agency that approves this, you will want to oversee the color scheme for the building, as will the Historic Preservation Board. I would strongly urge that to be condition of approval, just for their direction. He has provided some signage. He has also identified the dimensions of the signage. I'd like to go over that with the board just to clarify what's going on here. The first thing is on the very right-hand side, there's an overhang sign that's actually been on that site for many years. It was there for prior operations. He would like to install that sign and refurbish that sign and install a new one. That sign is about 6.95 square feet. There's a sign over the window that will be on the exterior of the building. That's 18.85 feet. The window sign, which is in the inside of the building, or has to be on the inside of the building, is not a permit requirement. But just for reference sake, that's 15.83 square feet. There's a logo on the door. That's also not permitted, or is not a permitted requirement. They can do that by right. That is 2.45 feet. And there's also a barber pole, which is technically a sign, but I don't have a square footage requirement on that for you. So the total signage that we're looking at right now is 44 square feet. He probably has about 20 to 25 feet of lease area in the front. So if you took our requirement of 2 square feet per each linear foot of the frontage of the building, for lease area, he meets that requirement. And again, the signs that are in the windows and the doors are on the inside, so therefore are not required to obtain permits. So I guess my question is, the board comfortable with what he's proposing with the signage?
So I'd ask Mr. Costello, the lighting that is there, is that just going to be reused? Is that going to be upgraded? Those are the ones that...
I believe that that lighting is in place right now. I don't know, we'll have to ask the applicants, but I think that they may either be upgrading it or replacing it, but I thought signage was there from the gallery at one time. You'll also note, I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, you'll also note there is a tree directly in front of his lease area, most probably why he's looking for a little more signage than he normally would be required to have.
So
You can also see there's a hanging sign over the art stop as well there.
Right. The square footage, not including the ones that are on the inside of the window that are permitted and do not require a permit. But the other side, the one that hangs over, the one over the window, and then the barber pole itself. So again, that square footage is 44.
No, that would also include the signage on the window and the door. If you took those off, you'd be at about 18 square feet, I think.
Okay, so that's my question is that those signs that are in the window do not require a permit from the inside.
That's correct.
And so the remaining signs that's being proposed is
Approximately 18 plus change.
And then how does that compare to what is permitted by the sign code?
It probably is under by quite a bit. If they have 20 square feet, I'm sorry, if they have 20 linear feet of frontage on that lease area, that would be 40 square feet that would be permitted.
Okay, so I just want to make sure the record is clear on that because, you know, again, the signs in the window from within, and then the barber pole itself would be added to the 18 square feet, which is still well under what the sign code is calling for. Okay. Board, questions, comments for Mr. Costello?
Jim, could you just put that picture up again of the artwork, please, of what the front's going to look like? Okay, that answers the one question. So the barber shop is just to the right of that door then? Not to the space to the
Yes,
left? To the
yes.
left. Okay.
Jim, is he proposing to change the color scheme of that area of the building?
Yes.
And the landlord's okay with that?
That's a good question. I haven't asked them that question yet, but it's a very good question, and hopefully they can answer it.
I'd be interested in knowing that because, you know, the entire building is under one kind of color, you know, facade or, you know, visual, and then he's now proposing to change a portion of that.
Right.
So as I
I'm
check
not
back,
sure how that,
as
go
I,
ahead.
as I check back, Mr. Moore, in my notes, I see that he's looking to open March, April of this year. So
Okay.
it's several months away. Would the board feel comfortable with holding this for 2 more weeks to vet those rest of those details out?
Yes, I would. I would propose that we hold it for 2 more weeks, Mr. Supervisor.
Okay.
So, Mr. Supervisor, they will be required to go to the Historic Preservation Board as well as this board. They'll have to submit paint chips and all sorts of other things to you after we get a verification from the owner that they're able to even do it. That could be a condition of approval if you really wanted to do that.
That could be. Or we could table it for 2 weeks and it could still be a condition of approval.
At your leisure.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Moore, I'd recognize you for a motion to table.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Supervisor. I propose to table this for 2 weeks. I'd like to make that motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilman Moore, seconded by Councilwoman Cole. We'll look to table this for 2 weeks. In the meantime, we can run, parallel discussions because one, if in fact the landlord is not okay with changing the color, then that makes that issue pretty easy for us to discuss. If the landlord is such, then I would guess that the landlord might, being an owner of the art shop, our art stop, that they may have an interest in what the color looks like as well. And so putting their 2 heads together to start to vet that out, they could still make some progress on that.
Very good.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to table. I'd ask for a roll call vote, please.
Droff,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden,
Aye.
5 ayes.
We'll move on to item G. This is Cameron. This is a request for a conditional use permit for a home improvement business and residence at 1780 Penfield Road. And I believe we may have the applicant online. So I'll ask Mr. Costello to kind of give us an update while we're bringing the applicant online with us. And I see him as I'm speaking.
Thank you.
That's fine.
We have David with us this evening. Again, we had a public hearing on this matter on the 20th of January. A couple of issues came up, one being that I had not provided you with a sign package for the site, which David had previously submitted, and also a view of what the shed looks like. That's really not a good view of the shed because I did receive a colored copy this morning, which is a little more attractive than that, but it is basically a 12 by 16 foot shed. The sign complies with our code requirements. I'm sure Mark will get that to a point where you can visualize it. Meets our code requirements. It's a 4 by 5 double face freestanding sign. It meets the criteria for signage, for freestanding signage for permits. They've also, I actually went out today because one of the things I was concerned about was, again, talking about the shed that they were proposing. There's no concern for the shed, but I wanted to verify for you what the exact setback was going to be for that. And while I was there, I had the pleasure of talking to David's wife, Sarah, who we looked at that shed and could not identify at this point in time exactly what the setback was. But I also indicated that if they're having concern for parking and they wanted to have a couple of more parking spaces, they could actually extend the driveway there, create a couple of parking spaces in the area where the shed's being proposed, and then possibly move the shed further to the east along the other property line, which has got some buffer there. There's a hedgerow there, and there is fencing to the rear, so it may act as a better buffer for them if that was more reasonable, but that was going to be up to them as to whether or not they wanted to do it. If they want to keep the shed where it is, my comment to you is that I just request that we identify prior to doing the final resolution as to exactly what the setbacks are, so there's a record of what those setbacks were approved by this board. Other than that, I think they've covered just about every other issue that we had for the site.
Okay, so let's hit these one at a time if we could, Board. And the easy one is with regards to the sign. We've seen a copy of the sign. We've had that. Mr. Costello was kind enough to get that to us last week, and we've got it there. It does meet the sign ordinance, and I'd ask the board any questions, concerns, issues regarding the sign.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. So that addresses the sign. And so let's talk about the proposed shed. I think the original information that we had, or at least that I've got in my sketch, is that the shed is 10 by 16. Mr. Costello, I heard you say 12 by 16.
It is 12 by 16.
So, and I just recognize in David, is the shed 12 by 16?
It is.
Okay. Make sure everybody's on the same page here, and no misunderstandings. Okay. So then, Mr. Costello, you brought up the point about parking and the moving of the shed, and I guess at this point I'd recognize David for any comments, thoughts that he may have.
So my wife Sarah actually expressed to me what Jim had.
President and CEO, Sarah?
Yes. Exactly.
I just want to make sure you get the title right.
So basically, she had told me what Jim had talked about, and it's actually quite appealing for the reasons Jim had mentioned. It also probably makes it a little bit easier for, I know this sounds ridiculous, for my plow guy, where's he going to put my snow? That he could just put it at the end of the driveway, which would be, I guess, on the north end of my property, technically the northwest end of my property. And then we would just probably turn the corner into the shed. So that actually sounded something like we should definitely consider. And it would also, as Jim had indicated, would increase the number of parking spots we would have.
Got it. Board thoughts, questions, comments for the applicant on that thought, suggestion?
Great idea, Mr. Costello.
Well, I talked to Tony about this earlier. He brought up a good point, is as we take away more green space, we are now, and they don't meet the setback requirements or the area requirements for green space as it is. It's not 35% of the site. But if you were to see fit to allow that shed to be put back and then additional parking put in, certainly the town engineer would want to review grades and that type of thing, which we do on a regular basis. Secondly, you would have to give relief to the amount of green space being removed from the site as part of the approval process.
And my only question is, to what extent this would delay the process?
Well, I guess that remains to be seen at this point, David. I think let's have the board make sure they have all of their questions answered here, and then we can circle back to that discussion before we finish up tonight. So
Okay.
I'll ask the board any additional questions or comments. I mean, we're trying to, on one hand, we're trying to squeeze an awful lot on a lot, if you will, with added parking and the shed and what have you. And so we're looking for some adjustments and amendments to the setback, potentially setback for the shed, potential green space coverage and what have you to get the additional space. So I think that's just something the board needs to weigh in. You know, does it meet the hurdle rates for doing that? And it looks
Jim,
like
could
you're
you
ready
just
to.
highlight again where the other option is to move the shed? I'm sorry, just use your cursor.
Right where Mark's got the hand, they'd like to move it over there if possible.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I might recommend to the board, if you're inclined to grant the actual conditional use permit and I think that's a function of them trying to get everything squared away financially for the site, you could table the matter regarding the driveway extension and the shed for another meeting or two if you needed to, as a condition of the conditional use permit being resolved. Allow them to have that conditional use permit for the use.
Understand. So,
Okay.
Councilwoman Draw.
That was my question, if we could go ahead with at least the conditional use, and then if,
I can work with them to come up with a plan that gives you the square footage of what's green, and then also what their plan is to lay it out so that it all fits properly.
and then we could still proceed, so they could proceed ahead and go ahead with their, getting conditional use so that they can proceed ahead
And
with
then
their
they can move forward
financial.
with their finances
Yeah,
as well. I know that's been
absolutely.
a problem for them, trying to get this resolved with the timeframe, so.
I would agree, I would recommend that. Mr. Supervisor, I've been up there and walking in that area quite a bit. I mean, what they've done with that building, you know, the improvement already up there. I think it's, the Camerons have done an outstanding job already of what they're doing. They're proving themselves that they really want to be a part of our community, and I would like to streamline this as much as we possibly can for them.
So, it sounds like you're interested in making a motion
I
to
would.
move forward with the conditional use. And, however, to hold on the shed and additional parking until further information or details.
I guess I would ask Mr. Cameron, would that affect you, Dave, at all, in not getting your pole barn up, and I don't know what your time frame is, you were looking for that pole barn to be set up? And
You're absolutely right. My priority right now is use of my property to conduct my business.
Great, thank you.
And also a caveat to that, my sign approval, but
Yeah.
most importantly, the use of my property.
Great. Then,
So that means you'd like to keep it as you're proposing it now with the shed location?
I'm okay tabling my shed
Okay.
if it could lead to me, getting approval for use as well as signage.
Yes, for the actual use of the property and for the signage, the board could address that issue and then hold off on the shed issue for a couple weeks of that.
then I
Okay.
would make that motion, Mr. Supervisor.
All right, so a motion is being made, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm thinking for the minutes, that you're making a motion to approve conditional use
Absolutely.
and to move forward with the conditional use and the sign that is in fact within code, and that at this time, we would look to hold the shed and any additional parking to allow discussion between the owner applicant, Mr. Costello, and possibly town engineer to just take a look at that for potential siting of a building, setbacks, green space, things like that.
I'll
All right.
second that, Mr. Supervisor.
Seconded by
I was,
Mr.
I was up there over the weekend, took a quick look at it, and I think Councilwoman Draw has offered a good resolution, and I will second that.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion, board, any additional questions or comments? I'll ask Mr. Cameron, any additional comments you would like to add to the record at this point?
Done, thank you.
Mr. Costello, any additional comments that we haven't already discussed that you believe should be part of the record this evening?
No.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. I'll ask for a roll call vote for the conditional use and the sign.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden,
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay, and with that, we'll move on to item
Can I just
H.
ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Just showing my ignorance. So conditional approval means that I can move forward and operate my business out of this location or not yet?
So the board will look to adopt a resolution next Wednesday. That will be February 3rd, in which we would adopt the formal resolution.
All right, very good. I just want to know what I tell my mortgage company, but thank you.
Understand. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you for your time. Be well, be safe. Okay, and we'll move on to item H. This is Mr. Vars and team request for a site plan approval of the Burger King Restaurant Office Building at 2146 Fairport 9 Mile Point Road. I know some additional materials have come in. I see Mr. Vars has joined us, and Mr. Costello, I'd ask for a brief update.
Thank you. As you know, we had our public hearing regarding this matter again on the 20th of January, and some of the issues that came out of the meeting had to do basically with buffering as it related to lighting, noise issues, and venting of exhaust from the restaurant. We received comments from neighbors regarding those matters. You also did receive a memo from Bruce Zaretsky, our landscape consultant, who suggested that there might be a need for possible landscaping along the pond area, although I'm not sure that's true at this point in time. And then also was questioning, did not make a comment, but was questioning what kind of barrier there was going to be between the outdoor dining area and the driving lane to the property. And Peter Vars did submit responses to those questions, which I think you've received. Also, I think there was some correspondence back from him regarding the venting that takes place in these the new restaurants that Burger King is constructing. Probably let him talk a little bit more about that in detail. In talking to Mark Valentine and his staff, the engineering staff, I think they've pretty much covered the technical issues for the board as it relates to drainage, traffic movements. I'm thinking of anything else, Mark, that might jump out at you?
No, I think the last comments we had were some technical ones. I think, obviously the board, in responses to the neighbors, I think were the outstanding items that were still out there.
Mark, could you bring up the rendering of the building? And we might be able to toggle between the site plan and then the rendering as I open it up for input and feedback, not only by the board, but also by Mr. Vars.
Do I have the rendering, Jim?
While we're talking about the rendering, one of the big issues that came up was the fact that the tower that was going to be adjacent to the actual building is not integral to the building, but is probably being utilized as a freestanding sign, which was at 23 feet in height. Mr. Vars did send a letter in verifying the fact that they would reduce that down to meet the code requirement of 20 feet.
I'm not sure if I have the rendering here.
Okay.
They should be in there. It might be one of the older ones near the top, I think.
Okay.
So as Mr. Valentine is just double checking to see if we have that, I'd recognize Mr. Vars for any comments, updates that he would like to add to the record.
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor and board members. Actually, Jim did a very good job of updating you on everything we've done since last week. We did submit a letter Monday, initially identifying what we had in our notes of 3 outstanding items, which were confirming the hours of operation, providing information on the exhaust hood system that the restaurant would be equipped with, and then noting that the column sign out towards Fairport 9 Mile Point Road would be modified and would be capped at the 20-foot height. And then additionally today, because there was some additional feedback about the exhaust system, we provided some additional information. And really what happens is with the Burger King restaurant, this is not your Burger King of old. It is not the Burger King of Panorama Trail. The new systems that Burger King utilizes include systems to contain the smoke and the grease in the hood system. They are now equipped with a catalytic converter that actually what's the word they use? I've got to make sure I get it right. That actually burns off 90% of the oil particles. So these are, like I said, it's not the Burger King of old. This is more in line with the other restaurants that are already in this 25441 corridor. The system they use exceeds the EPA requirements. It exceeds the New York State Building Code requirements. And all this information would be provided to the building department as part of the building permit application. We also did share with you the fact the operator of this restaurant has built similar Burger King restaurants in the last 3 to 5 years utilizing this new technology, so that you would be able to, that we can confirm that it works. One is at Maiden Lane and Mount Read Boulevard in the town of Greece. One is at the south end of New York State Route 332, New York State Route 96 intersection in the town of Farmington. And the most recent one is in the city of Rochester at the corner of Culver Road and Humboldt Street. So we feel confident that the systems that are going to be in place are going to do the job that they need to do, and that this restaurant is going to operate from that odor exhaust situation very similar to the other restaurants that are located in this area. One other thing we just would want to address, we did receive Bruce Zaretsky's comments yesterday, provided written responses. As Mr. Costello pointed out, what we will be doing, the outdoor seating area that is along the south side of the building, adjacent to the access road, that will be separated, or the barrier, the word that Bruce used, is we would be providing a black aluminum rail fence that basically encloses that seating area.
Okay.
And that will be added to the site plan so staff can confirm and review that prior to getting plans signed. So that area will be, there will be a barrier there. The other comment about the landscaping, additional buffer plantings along the stormwater facility, our thought process on that is, as you can see there where Mark is dragging his cursor, there is additional plantings being proposed. Those are primarily shrub plantings, though. They're more of a function of the water quality aspects of the pond. But two things we want to point out. As you can see on this aerial photo, the pond was purposely located off the property line, off the west, such that the existing vegetation that's there would be saved. So we've actually taken away a little bit of the future development land so that we could maintain that vegetated buffer. The other thing is at the northern end of this, that's where the existing facility exists that was constructed, back in 1990 when the first road connection was put through and M&T Bank was put in. But that facility was built and we're just simply expanding it. Point being is the view that from the residential neighborhood to the east has today is not going to change. We're not clearing any vegetation to construct this facility. So there's going to be no current screening that's being removed. Our proposal is, and our thought process is any additional screening that may be required really should be done as part of whatever development proposal or development plan is developed for the former Cornerstone Restaurant parcel trial property, because that screening and buffering really should be designed based on what is developed there so that it can be the right screening, right design in correspondence with the landscape design or use of what's going there. So that's really the summary of, I think, of the last 2 days, really, of additional information that we've submitted. So if we could answer any remaining questions that the board would have at this time.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Vars. I'd like to maybe take it, I know it's one site, but I'd like to maybe take it, one section at a time. So we've been having a lot of conversation about the Burger King restaurant, and I'd like to ask board any additional questions on the restaurant proposal for Mr. Vars, whether it be and any discussion that or additional information on drive-through, any additional information as it relates to any other aspect of Burger King, including the discussion that he had about the scrubber system for that facility.
Mr. Supervisor, if I may, a couple comments. One, after the last work session we had meeting on this, I think I was asking about the exhaust system. I did go out to the Burger King out on the in Farmington and sat there for quite a long time during the lunchtime hours. So, and again, as Mr. Varza said, there's not steam and all kinds of smoke. You really can't smell. You can see people when they're getting out. It really is, I think, as he said, a new system that they're using, a new exhaust system. So I was pleased with that piece of it. Other comment on that, again, the lowering the sign to the 20 feet. I'm real pleased that you were able to do that and that works well, because that was one of my concerns, is I didn't want to see something out up there. That's 20 feet, I think, is plenty high enough. And then I do like the piece of the railing that's going to be on the eating area on the one side. I think that will add to the, to the outdoor eating area and make it more, not so commercialized, more of a friendly eating area up there if we have to have, if we're going to have a fast food restaurant up in that area. So I'm pleased with the work you've done on that. So thank you. Those were some of the questions I had answered. Thank you.
Okay. Board, other questions or comments regarding the Burger King portion of the proposal? Okay, let's shift gears. The building behind, an office building, and that is going to come. The proposals for that to come at a later date, not in conjunction with the development of the restaurant. And Mr. Vars and his team has shown additional landscaping in addition to the landscaping that is existing there. And I would just ask, Board, as you take a look at that, any specific questions about that building, traffic flow for that building, anything like that you do not believe that we got either discussed or finalized at the public hearing? And we do have that roadway to the north, and I know a question had come up about that, and I think some questions or concerns came up about, the speed through that area. Part of the LUAMP program, the discussion was to have that to provide an alternate means of egress from those properties that are back behind the uses up front, and that could be for coming or going for that road. And is the board satisfied with the discussion we had on that? Okay. I'll ask Board, anything else that we may not have touched on that you believe we should enter into the record and make sure we have all the input on?
Mr. Supervisor, I apologize. If I could just step back to the Burger King building, I do have a question that just kind of came up.
Go right ahead.
The outdoor seating area that Mr. Vars referred to, and maybe the question is best asked to him, that's just curb height, I assume, the seating area?
Yes, it is. Yes.
And you referred to a railing or a fencing that goes around that? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you'll know the answer to this question, but maybe Mr. Costello might. But as I look at the front of Panera, the building to the south, or two buildings to the south, I can't tell from the photo I'm looking at, but it appears that there might be some kind of, the railing might be, I don't know, a little more of a protector, almost like a bollard built into the fencing. And I'm assuming that's in the event the car went off and crashed into that perhaps there would be something that would, slow it down rather than just a metal fence. Do you know the design that you currently have for the Burger King and what that entails?
We don't. We've done a couple of different styles, for lack of a better way to put it. But actually, I think you bring up a good point. That's something similar to what is at Panera. That my point is, we're not talking well, let me rephrase that. It does need to be something that would offer a level of protection, because that is the point, is because of a car, a curb, and a table. There should be some
Right.
type of a barrier there. So we'll be sure to detail that correctly and review that with staff if that's fine with the town board.
Yeah, Mark, it might be easier to view it from the 250 side of the building there if you can pop out around the corner. But yeah, that's just my concern. That's going to be right there at a main, kind of a main entryway, you know, substantial traffic perhaps.
Right.
Bob, I was thinking that, yes, number one, for protection purposes, but also it is kind of a bland area with no landscaping by the building there. I was wondering if you could do, Peter, if you could do some kind of large planters with maybe some trees or some bushes or something in them to provide some type of greenery along that outdoor dining area, and also possibly just another obstacle for somebody to hit before they get to the fence, or just after the fence.
Yeah, we definitely can look at something like that. And we did something similar actually out at the Grease location, very similar to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. All right, board, anything else? All right.
Mr. Supervisor,
Yes, sir.
real quick, would it be possible for the staff, whether it's Jim Costello, to send us a photo of the building?
Peter, I know you brought that up the other night and shared it with us. Do you have that with you right now?
I'm going to look right now and hopefully I find it.
And while you're doing that, one of my comments to the board, to
Signs.
remind you,
Signs.
is signs. That's right.
Yep.
You're going to have to sit down with Burger King to address the number of
Yep.
signs that you're proposing, because they're an extravagant number compared to others in the area. So that will be an ongoing issue to get resolved as we move forward.
Yeah, we understand that will be a completely separate application. Here we go. Hold on.
If you have the rendering, Peter, let me know, and then I'll stop sharing, just so PCTV is gonna,
Yeah, I'm ready when you are.
okay, I'll stop sharing, and then you can share. It's
The
gonna
magic of technology.
cause some issues downstairs, and I apologize to them, because it moves people around on the screen, but
Okay. All right, let me know.
I'm out, so you
Oh,
should be good to
okay.
share.
Okay, I think, can
There
people
you go.
see?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
So, this is all four sides of the store. Up here, that would be the 250 frontage. This is the column sign we were talking about that will be capped at 20 feet. This would be the side to the next rendering to the right is the side that would be along the access roadway. In the bottom left-hand corner, that's the rear of
Right.
the restaurant. And then in the lower right-hand corner, that would be the side of the drive-through pickup aisle, the side that's facing north.
Okay.
So these are just a couple of perspectives. This is probably the best, could give you the best idea.
All right, thank you. And Peter, if you could email that over to the town if they don't have it, that'd be appreciated.
Yep, I think they do. but
We do
we'll be
have
sure.
it.
Yep, we
Yes.
do,
I
we
just
do have it. I think we just
Don't have it on
We don't
my,
have it on our
yeah,
Okay.
drive
my
tonight.
stick tonight, so.
So we'll just make sure, sometime tomorrow we get that pushed out to the board for their information. I have a
Thank
black
you.
and white, copy, but I think that color copy would be good to have. All right, thank you. Other questions or comments, board? And then I'll circle back to Mr. Costello. Anything additional that we haven't discussed either at the public hearing or this evening, other than the signage that I was going to talk about, that you and I talked about? And it sounds like Peter has got that. That'll be a signed package that'll have to come back for this board to review, Peter. And, so I think you probably know, it bears repeating, that the board tends to be a bit stingy on the signs and to make sure that that stays more within code and not out of code.
I'm especially concerned if you're considering that sign to be your freestanding sign, you will not be able to have a freestanding sign out by the road, and I'm not certain that's to your best interest, especially since that's facing to the west and everything's going north-south. You may be more inclined to want to have a freestanding sign that's double-faced facing out to the road, where you can read it from the north and the south as you're going by. Something to think about.
Okay. Yeah, and I also know, too, that, whatever happens in the back, they wouldn't get a sign either. I mean, it's one sign per the code.
Right.
Well, ironically, because you're finishing that roadway up, there are signs out on Route 250 and on 441 that do allow for remote signage on that driveway. That was approved by the board several years ago.
Right.
So it's something to look at as an option.
Yep. And then the one thing I know we talked about last week that we would agree to, that any resolution that is considered, is that we acknowledge that the future construction of the office building in the back would have to come back to the town board for the once we have the building design done and the tenants identified, that we'd have to come back to this board for review of that. It's not simple of just going and pulling a building permit.
Right. Correct. And that would be included in the resolution as well. So, okay. Board, are we at a point that someone would like to make a motion to move forward with this project as discussed, with a number of the caveats that we talked about? Obviously, the building in the back will have to come back to the board. The signage package, that'll have to come back to the board. But are we at a point to take action on this matter?
I'd be happy to move it with all those caveats. I think, it's been very well vented, and between Peter and Debbie going out and looking at Farmington, you get a good idea about the concerns we had, and we know that the size of the column is lower. Really like that seating area. There's a lot of, it's a good proposal, I think, and we just have to wait on the signs and get some more information, but we can I had to move to approve it as is without the sign package that has to come back to us, as well as the information we need for the signs for the office building in the back. Is that the extent of caveats?
Yep. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it, Mr. Supervisor.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilwoman Cole, seconded by Councilwoman Draw. One last opportunity for any input by either board, staff, or the applicant. Okay, seeing none, then I would ask for a roll call vote for this application.
Draw.
Aye.
Cole.
Aye.
LaFountain.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay, we'll move. Thank you very much, Peter. As always, be well, be safe, and we'll look forward to catching up with you on the sign package portion of the application.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for your time tonight, and have a good evening.
All right, you too. Thank you. We'll move on to informational items. Our first item is the Clark House remediation. And Mr. Tate has got a couple of updates for us on this. And with that, Mr. Tate, have at it.
Sure, thank you. As Mr. Costello mentioned earlier during the priorities and goals, back in December, we did receive a kind of an assessment of the building of the Clark House with some things that would need to be done. A few of the items that were noted is to kind of take care of some of the foundation work, some of the waterproofing and making sure that water's not getting in that unnecessarily, as well as some mold in the basement as a result of that water. Have reached out and met with a few different companies to kind of come through and take a look and see what would need to be done, and what the first steps would be. Per New York State law, anything over 10 square feet of mold does need to, or would require a mold investigation assessment prior to any remediation. So that's more or less the first step right now, is to kind of determine exactly what is growing, where, and what would need to be done with that. I do have an estimate provided. One of the companies that we met with is Expert Environmental and Construction Group. They are licensed and able to do not only the assessment, but also the abatement as well. I am waiting to hear back from a few others. However, they have kind of provided me with, the estimate, and helped, even educate me on what what exactly would need to be done to kind of move forward. So that's, with that said, I think that's the kind of the first step, is to have the assessment done, see what that comes back with, and they'd be able to kind of better fine tune some of the numbers as to what some anticipated costs would be for actual remediation and drainage work and foundation improvements to the building.
So just to give you maybe some additional information to think about, as we did with the report that Plan Architectural put together for us, the idea was we didn't know what we didn't know as it related to that facility. It's a facility that's I think 1834. If memory serves me correct, vintage. It has been added to and modified a bit over the years and opened up. But one of the first items that we had talked about is that the bones of the building is what we really need to take a look at, and for the board to take a look at. So when I say the bones of the building, we got to take a look at the foundation. If you got a bad foundation, we want to be careful of what we do, how we do it, until we understand what those dynamics are. The other aspect, is the drainage component. What work we might have to do with the sill plates, as Mr. Tate indicated. And then the roof structure is another piece. And once we have the foundation, the envelope foundation, roof, drainage, that aspect of it, then would lead us to what do we potentially tackle next? What might a tenant tackle? But as we go through, again, I think some early numbers that Eric is seeing, and why I think he's recommending that we take a look at that assessment is that rough numbers could be approaching $100,000 to do this work. And at some point, I think the board, we're going to have to ask ourselves, how much are we willing to put into this structure over what period of time? So I might suggest that we continue to explore getting some better, harder numbers so that we understand, and an upfront initial estimate of approximately $1,800 to get that, I think gives us that better information before we pull the trigger on actual drainage, foundation, and other work associated with that. So I offer that up for at least your thoughts and consideration.
Yeah, Mr. Supervisor, I think that that's the appropriate step. I mean, all along, we've had the intention of a potential tenant coming in to that building and leasing that building. And certainly as landlords and owners, we're going to have to do some capital improvements to in a very old building that, that we took possession of with the purchase of the Shadow Pines and Clark House property. So I know that you've been very active in pursuing tenants for the building. We had an RFP out a little while ago, and unfortunately did not have much success with that. but there has been a level of interest recently. I won't mention any names, but moving forward, I think that we do need to make some capital improvements to the building in order to come to some agreement with a future tenant who might come in and make their own improvements to get the space to a standard that they want, whether they want to have a restaurant or some other use in that building. So I would support moving ahead with this initiative.
Okay. Would you make that as a motion, Mr. Moore?
I'm sorry, I will make that as a motion, yes.
Okay.
I'll second it, Mr. Supervisor.
Moved by Councilman Moore, second by Councilwoman Draw. Further discussion on that matter? All right, I'll ask for a roll call vote. Those in favor, aye.
Draw,
Aye.
Cole,
Aye.
LaFountain,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Ockenden,
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item B. This is a hold harmless agreement. This is 143 Farmbrook Drive. And I believe the applicant may be with us, and or the property owner, I should say, not the applicant, but property owner. And I'll recognize Mr. Valentine for just a quick update, and then if we bring Mr. Provenzano in, we can add him to that part of that discussion.
Yeah, so Mr. Provenzano's been working with the code enforcement on this. He has a request in for his privacy fence between him and the neighbor. I believe the fence is in, but he's coming back before the board to get the hold harmless agreement because it is in one of our utility areas. So we do have a storm pipe going through that area. So as part of that would be a requirement to obtain the hold harmless agreement, knowing that if we had to get in, maintain the pipe, do any service to it, if the fence had to be removed, we would remove it, and then it would be at Mr. Provenzano's cost to replace the fence. So I provided previously his letter. He's got a sketch of the fence, and then scroll down, shows the property and then the approximate location of the fence, obviously coming along the side of the house and then continuing back for that privacy area.
Okay. So, Mr. Provenzano, welcome. You indicated on your letter that you'd like to install the fence. Is the fence already up? I think you might be muted.
Yes, it is already up.
Okay. And, I note a letter that Heidi Bale had submitted to you back in September to issue a stop work order on the work that was going on that fence. And at the time it was started but not completed. Did you ever satisfy that stop work order request?
It was completed as much as I was going to do.
Okay. All right.
So she issued the stop work order and I was already done. Everything I already was going to do.
Okay. All right. So I know we've got a number of things pending in town court that we need to get resolved. And this is one of those that is on that docket before the courts. And I might suggest that we get those things taken care of before the board rules on this particular matter.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I would suggest to the board at this point that we might hold this matter pending the satisfactory work with the court to address any and all outstanding matters that are currently before the court.
But this is striving towards working forward to getting everything resolved. Okay. Which I've been pushed to do this and pushed to do this and pushed to do this. Actually, after Heidi Bale told me to put up a fence instead of a berm, like I originally wanted to put it up, to barricade the neighbors so that the neighbors stay on their side of the yard and I stay on my side of the yard.
So I understand. I mean, the board could do one of two things this evening, or actually one of three things this evening. We could approve this, we could deny it and have you remove it, or we could table it pending resolution of things in the court. And I'm proposing that at this time that we table it because if it were to go to a vote tonight without these other matters taken care of, I will tell you, I would vote to have the fence removed. So it may be in your best interest to have this matter tabled until the court matters are resolved. Okay. So with that, board, I see that Mr. Provenzano elected to leave the meeting. And so I would ask for any other thoughts that the board might have on this particular matter, on how they might like to deal with it.
Mr. Supervisor, I think your recommendation is good for me. You know, leaving it held leaves the option for us approving it down the road pending any court decisions. So I kind of view it as just putting it on hold temporarily. And if we determine down the road to approve it, then we've got that ability to do so and progress this moving forward. So I would support your motion to hold it.
Okay. So I'll make that as a motion to table at this time and to take care of any matters that currently exist before town court before any ruling is any final ruling is made on this matter. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second that.
Okay, so moved and seconded by myself, seconded by Mr. Moore. Further discussion on this matter? Seeing none, I'd ask for a roll call vote, please.
Draw.
Aye.
Cole.
Aye.
LaFountain.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
5 ayes.
Okay, this brings us to the end of the agenda. I'd just like to remind the board, under our held items, we have the issue of the Harris Whalen Trailhead on 250. I think Mr. Tate did submit to us the fact that he went out and actually put some stakes up and with some tape around those stakes, orange tape, or
They're reflective fiberglass stakes. They've got reflective tape at the top of them.
Okay, so I stand corrected, the reflective stakes with the reflective tape. I would ask that the board take a look at those maybe sooner than later. I would speculate that today, with all of the snow, that you might be able to see the orange. And so now might be a good time to do that, and so that we can bring this to some logical closure. All right, seeing no other business to come before the board this evening, the January 27th, 2021 work session will stand adjourned at 9:13 p.m. I would like to recognize everyone that participated. Thank you for staff for being here. Thank you to PCTV. As always, be well and be safe.
Thank you.